Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're your hosts. I am Justin.
And I'm Challee.
This podcast is a space where we explore practical ways to nurture your mind, body, and spirit to create a happier and healthier life.
The content of this podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not establish a therapist-client relationship. If you are experiencing emotional distress or mental health concerns, please seek support from a licensed therapist or a qualified healthcare provider. Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about Shayla's experience with postpartum depression.
Yay!
Taking this from a more lived experience rather than a clinical lens. So we're going to go over maybe what some of the warning signs to have some additional support and being able to think about what we might be experiencing that is beyond what we thought we would experience after pregnancy, or even, goodness, we just recently found out that it can even start after 20 weeks in pregnancy. You might start to experience some of these things. Getting us going, Challee, can you give us a little bit of a better understanding of what postpartum depression means to you?
Yes. So this was before I had even gotten into really the mental health field. This is the kind of kick that led me in that direction. So before my son was born, I had never gone to therapy. I had never been on any type of mental health medication at all. So that is what started this journey for me. But yeah, so I had my son, oh my gosh, almost 8 years ago. And I remember I was so excited for him to be here, not just because I was 42 weeks pregnant, but I was so excited for him to be here. I was so excited. I was feeling all the feelings. And let's see, I'm going to give some background info because I do think it's important. I was in labor for 23 hours and it eventually led to an emergency C-section. And he was perfect. He was fine. Obviously, he was 42 weeks, so he was a big boy. But he was good. I got to hold him for a little while. Well, at first, no, they had to, take care of me. So his dad took him and introduced him to the family that was waiting in the waiting room, and it was great. And then I was just kind of put into a random room, like not my own room. I just was kind of left in a room. It was I remember being very dark, and I was just like, hello, anybody here? And so that happiness was like kind of turning into like, hello, you just took a giant baby out of me. Could I maybe have him? And then I got to my room and they brought him in and I held him for a little bit. And at this point, it was like midnight. So they were like, okay, get some sleep because I'm sure you're exhausted. And so they took him to the nursery and I was not exhausted. I mean, I was probably exhausted, but like your adrenaline is pumping. Like I did not go to sleep. I just laid there like, what just happened? And by the time they brought him back in at like 7 in the morning, I remember they like wheeled him back in and I remember just thinking like, oh, I'm good. I'm good. I don't want to hold him. Like I just 8 years later and it still kills me. Like the guilt still is just like awful because I remember just feeling like no connection, no bond. They tell you like as soon as your baby's here, like you're immediately going to have this bond. And I do feel like it was because I was separated from him for so long for no reason. And so I just wanted nothing to do with him. I didn't want to change him. He had some feeding issues. We had to use special bottles. That was overwhelming. I didn't really want to feed. Not that I didn't want to feed him, but if somebody else was there, I would be like, no, you can feed him. You can change him. You can hold him. Like, I really just didn't want anything to do with him. And it was the worst feeling ever. And I remember just feeling so depressed because it was just like I thought I was going to have this wonderful bond and I didn't.
So it sounds like this was very different than what you anticipated that process looking like, and the day after or days afterwards. When you're thinking about the part that was really depressing, did you feel lonely? So you said not bonded with him at first. How did that feel?
It felt horrible.
Yeah.
There was so much guilt. It felt like they wheeled a random baby into my room and they were just like, here you go. It didn't feel like I thought it should feel. And now, second time around, I know, like, this baby is not going to the nursery. She's coming right to me, but I didn't have that voice
Mhm.
to be able to say that. I just assumed whatever they were doing was what they needed to do. But it was awful. And then, I just kept saying, like, as soon as we get home, it'll be better. Like, I'm in the hospital. Like, this is awful. As soon as we get home and he can be in his nursery and it will be great. And, it did get a little bit better. But then I started just feeling really sad and just overwhelming feelings of just depression. And my doctors had told me, like, your hormones after you give birth are going to be just off the wall. So they had said, like, you're going to feel depressed. You might feel anxious. You might feel overwhelming joy. Like, you're going to feel all these big emotions, and it's totally normal and okay. And then they said, like, if you're still feeling this way after, I think it was like 4 weeks, they told me, I should let them know. Or obviously, if I was having any like thoughts of hurting myself or the baby, that would be a good reason to call. So I didn't really think much of it. I'm like, yeah, my hormones, they suck and it's fine and it's all going to get better. And then it just didn't. And then I remember I was like right at the 4 week mark and I was getting established with a new primary doctor. So this was my first time meeting this doctor. And I went in and they did like the depression screening that they do. And I remember it didn't hit me until I did that. And she did the screening and she was like, when did you have him? And I'm like, About 4 weeks ago. And she was so wonderful. And she was like, I think you might have postpartum depression. And I was like, no, it's just the baby blues. And she's like, no, I'm going to need you to pick up your phone and call your doctor right now and tell them like you need to get in for an appointment right now. And I was like, okay. So I called my OB and I told them what was going on as I was sobbing. And they were like, okay, can you be here in an hour? And I was like, yeah, I'll be right over, but like, it's fine. And then I remember I went to the OB and the doctor that was available was one of the guys because like they have three guy doctors and then two female PAs. So I'm like, hopefully I can talk to a female about this. No, I had to talk to one of the guys. And so I was like, "Ugh, he's not gonna get it."
Okay.
And I remember I sat down and he was like, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. My primary doctor gave me this screen and says I'm depressed. And then he looked at it and I was still crying and he was like, "Why are you upset?" And I'm like, "Because I can't even be strong enough to stop crying." And I still remember he said to me, "You just birthed a human. You are like a god. You are superwoman." And he was like, "This isn't normal. This isn't something that you need to just get through." And he said, I'm diagnosing you with postpartum depression and I'm going to prescribe you medication and you need to get established with a therapist. And I was just like, oh my God, like mental health medication. Ew. That was a big deal for me too. And
Can I stop you
yes.
there? I want to ask about how was it going through that screen? And it sounds like you were honest within the screen, but was that tough to kind of admit that you were experiencing that? Because I think so many times it's just looked at you should be so joyed that you have this child.
Mhm.
But I think so many women do experience this that there's other thoughts than that.
Mhm.
Intrusive thoughts. Maybe there's these really depressive thoughts, and that's not talked about as much. So tell me a little bit about how that process was of being honest about that.
I was just so exhausted and like physically exhausted, but just emotionally exhausted at that point where I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna be honest because I know it's hormones. I know they're gonna tell. I don't know why I had that in my head, but I was like, I know they're just doing this screen like just to do it, just to check off a box that they did it. So, yep, I'm going to just do it.
Why did you have it stuck in your head that it was just the hormones?
I don't know. I was not. into the whole mental health thing. I
Yeah.
don't know if that was just because, like growing up, we didn't really hear about it a lot, and it was it was way more stigmatized than it is now, where it's like if you are on meds, like you're unstable, like you know, and so I think you only see the extreme mental health stuff back then on like TV shows. So like if you're watching TV, it's like, this serial killer or whatever. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm not that bad.
Put in that box,
Yeah.
labeled. I can really even relate to that sense of like when you would hear back in the day postpartum depression or kind of anything perinatal depression, anything along those lines, it was associated with the worst case scenario. It was something terrible and awful that happened. So
Yes.
then, oh my goodness, why would you as a mom want to be even thought about being put in that box? So it might be really easy to shove these things down. And that's when that worst case scenario happens
Mhm.
because these are normal things that happen because you went through a life-changing experience. Having a child is life-changing on so many levels, but even just thinking about the hormone change and the way that might change mental health and our brain is always changing and adapting. So the more negative things that we tell ourselves that stem from that guilt or that shame, the more our brain's going to believe that and look for evidence for that.
Yes. Yep. Also, I really struggled with my mental health from a teenager. I mean, I've talked previously like how I had trouble with an eating disorder and I was just oof, yeah. I was a rough teen. So part of me going in there and just being like totally honest was for him, like I know that I have been struggling with something,
Mhm.
and when it was just me, it was like, whatever. But I really, through all of it, I really wanted to be a good mom. And so I kind of told myself, like, if I need to be honest in order for him to have the best mom possible, then I'm going to do it.
I think so many women can relate to that of just wanting to be a good mom. So taking that and shifting a little bit to have it be that mom has to be well for the baby to be well.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's not admitting defeat, but it is admitting that, hey, like something doesn't feel right about this and knowing that that can happen. It doesn't mean that we are worst case scenario or that we are going to do something awful, but it can mean that life could be a little bit better and
Hmm.
we may not have to deal with that with as long as we can get to a point of being honest about these things. You didn't go away in an ambulance or a cop car. You were able to live a better life and show up better for him, it sounds like. Even just having that initial conversation that had to be so hard to have. Hmm.
Yeah, it was tough, but like as soon as I started talking, I just didn't stop.
Yeah.
And so by the time I got to the OB doctor and I handed him the thing that they had done, and I was just kind of like, at that point, what do I have to lose? So, yeah. And then, God, my first therapy appointment was just like the most awkward thing ever.
And again, there has not really been a big space to talk about these things. If you look at mainstream media, if you look at even families and the story they tell about pregnancy and birth is that it was this beautiful thing and so happy that you're here. The more challenging parts tend to be left out. And so thinking about that is A, we might not have even the language or the words to express what's going on because we know what those intrusive thoughts may be telling us, but goodness, we probably don't want to tell the first person that we're seeing that we're getting support from exactly every one of those thoughts. So being able to have some better language and phrases to be able to share what we're going through can be so beneficial. And I think that's something that had really lacked because around pregnancy and giving birth, it was just words of joy and gratitude and that things are perfect and wonderful. There weren't a lot of conversations around the challenging parts of it.
Yeah, and then going to therapy, that was my first experience with therapy, and I didn't know what I was walking into. Like, was I gonna get scolded for feeling this way? Like, I had no idea what therapy was. So it's like, am I gonna have to hear about how like this is awful and I need to change? Or you just don't know. It was so nerve-wracking. And thank God I had just the best therapist ever. Yeah, Grace Ann, if you're watching. But yes, she was wonderful and she really helped me through. And she didn't so much make me feel all better, but she made me feel okay not feeling all better.
Ooh.
And that was what was really helpful to me.
So knowing that it was okay to
Yeah.
be okay in that moment.
Yes, like, to know that I didn't have to be okay, and that was okay. That was what she did for me, and it was amazing, and I have looked up to her ever since, and that is why I eventually ended up pursuing the same career path.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think having that experience allowed you to separate from that narrative of being a bad mom? Because I know you had mentioned that there was a lot of guilt around like you just wanted to be a good mom. And so in my head, I go the opposite of that, of being a bad mom. So did that help you separate from that?
Yes, and I don't remember who said it to me, but someone said that if you're genuinely worried about being a bad mom, like you genuinely are just so terrified that you're going to be a bad mom, that shows you that you're not a bad mom because bad moms don't care if they're bad moms. And I have told myself that it's 8 years later, and anyone who's a mom will tell you the mom guilt never goes away. You are always worried if you're a bad mom. And I have to keep reminding myself, like, if I was a bad mom, I wouldn't care if I was a bad mom.
And I appreciate you going that angle of it because that was what I was curious of like it is something that might always exist, but is there a way to kind of stop yourself and stop your brain from looking for those evidence? Because you're gonna make mistakes. People make mistakes. We're human,
Mhm.
but it doesn't label us. It doesn't put us in a category. So I appreciate you sharing that part.
I love that so much. I used it on my husband too, because he was, when he was stepping into the stepfather duties, and he was like, I'm so worried about being a bad stepdad. And I'm like, well, wise one once told me, if you are worried about being a bad stepdad, that's showing that you are not a bad stepdad. Because a bad stepdad wouldn't care if they were bad. So you can really, when you think about it, like that relates to a lot more than just moms. But the fact that you care enough to not want to be a bad mom, stepdad, dad, whatever, is the first step in showing that like you're not a bad one.
With going home and after like giving birth and then that 4 weeks later, then you got started on medication, it sounds like you got involved in therapy. Did it resolve some of those concerns and worries moving forward about like those intrusive thoughts or the guilt that you had about not being a good mom? Then did it start to resolve some of that?
It did, for sure, and it made me a lot more comfortable asking for help. Yeah, like during therapy I learned that it's a strength to ask for help. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So like I went to therapy. I learned it's okay to ask for help. I then asked for help. Then I got help. And it's as simple as like texting a mom friend and being like, hey, is this normal? And just getting the reassurance, but having that vulnerability to be like, I don't know if this is normal or not.
And when thinking about that, it's not an instant fix. And that's why I was curious of the progression of it. It's not like you get on that medication the first day, you go to one therapy session, everything's fixed.
Everything's good. I'm good. Thank you. Wave the magic wand. No, it definitely took some time.
Yes.
It was quicker than I thought it was going to be, though.
Okay.
I really feel like I just needed somebody else to be like, it's okay to not be okay. Like, that really did resonate with me so much. But I feel like I got over that initial hump really fast. And then it was just working on myself from there.
I think something to think about is that we're probably much harder on ourselves in our own head.
Oh my gosh.
So just letting that out and letting someone know, and then being able to have some reassurance that like someone else has experienced this, even if it's not directly like the doctor, but like, wow, there's a name for this. It makes
Mm-hmm.
sense that I'm going through something like this rather than when we don't let it out and we don't have knowledge of it, we think we're the only one experiencing. And that can be across anything that we're going through. But our brain convinces us that we're the only one that has ever experienced this, and then therefore I'm bad.
Yep. Or I'm weak.
weak.
Yes. Yep.
And what a vulnerable process of being a parent, whether, mom, dad, whoever, there's a vulnerable piece that comes into being a parent, and that can be really hard to share things because we don't want to be viewed as weak.
Mhm.
And then also, I'm sure you want to be strong for the child. And being strong for that child is you being well and you asking for help, you not being okay in the times that you're not okay, where the thought of being weak can really limit us reaching out and asking for that assistance or support.
Yeah, and I mean, surrounding yourself with supportive people is so helpful. I mean, I had some support when I was pregnant with Richard. Shout out Andrea. But no, really, like that was my go-to is Andrea. I would be like, well, I was pregnant, like, is this normal? Is this normal? Is this normal? It helped that she was a nurse too. So I could be like, is this really gross thing normal? But just having that was so helpful. And I'm so grateful that I have a very wonderful best friend who I can go to now for anything. And she has 3 kids. So she has been there, done that. So I can ask her, like, is this, because there's so much in this pregnancy too that it's like, this is not what happened last time. So
Yeah.
then I'll ask her, like, is this normal? Yup. Okay, cool. Thanks. All right, awesome. But having a friend that you can be vulnerable with, like, I can call my friend and she knows that I absolutely just adore my child and will go to the ends of the earth for him. And I love that kid so much. I can call her and be like, this kid, like, how much do you think I can get for him if I try to sell him on Etsy? Like,
Ah,
I and just having somebody that can be like, "I understand,"
what a
can't
good
sell your kid on Etsy, but I understand.
What a good point to make, though, also, is that sometimes that support system might be chosen family too. And
Yes.
it does not always have to be blood. And I think sometimes we can be so limited in what support we accept because we want it to be our biological family, especially in situations like this. Not saying that they're bad, but our support system can be more than that, where we might get different perspectives and different responses because different people had different experiences with growing up, with pregnancy, with raising children. So trying to let ourselves be open to that support system may look a little bit different than what we initially
Mhm.
thought it would.
Yes. My best friend, Danelle, I refer to her when we go places as my sister. Like, she's had to take me to the hospital a couple times for some, like, scares. And I'm like, I gotta grab my sister from the waiting room. Hold on. I mean, I just showed you, like, I show off pictures of her kids. And I'll be like, look at my niece. Isn't she so cute in her Halloween costume? And yeah, she is 100% just my chosen family. And she's stuck with me forever. There's nothing she can do about it. We're just family now. Sorry.
And there's truth in that it takes a village
Oh my gosh, yeah.
in so many different aspects. But children and people, we thrive in communities. So being able to find what that looks like for us is so important, especially in some of these tougher times that we can't share everything that we're going through with everybody, but having those select people that we know we're going to get that good support from.
Mhm. God, I shouted out so many people today. Oh my gosh, everyone better watch this podcast so you can hear your name, feel special.
Thinking about this topic, what a wonderful topic, and being able to give it some space and knowing that the discomfort is not just you experiencing or just us experiencing it. It is something that more people experience and just don't have an opportunity to talk about as much.
I
So,
try to talk about it as much as I can. Like, I am so comfortable now sharing, like, yeah, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression after I had my son. And yeah, it was a horrible experience. And just saying, like, I am so terrified to have to go through that again. And I'm taking steps to not have to go through it again this time. And
mhm.
just being honest and talking about it is really what you need. Because if I had heard more people talking about it, I would have been more comfortable to talk about it and or more aware of what was even going on. So please just continue to talk about it. I feel like we say that in every show.
Yeah,
You gotta just
it's a
talk
common
about it.
theme.
Yep.
So, wrapping this topic up, I really appreciate everything that you had shared, your vulnerability. and being able to give a little bit more space to this. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week. And if we have any comments or anybody wants to share their experience of how they've been able to work through this, because it is such a unique process. So your experience is going
Mhm.
to be different than probably anybody who is watching it. And we'd
Yep.
love to hear how we've been able to work through this and how we can kind of build this community. So
Yep.
thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yeah, we can check back in a few months and see how I'm doing in my postpartum life with this baby. Till then, yes, definitely let us know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, and we will see you next episode.
Thank you so much.